Hello, this is Mustafa Mehri, and today I'm going to explain how to use statistics, specifically mean and standard deviation, to analyze performance of a group. In this video, you will learn how to use Excel functions and conditional formatting to have a very quick analysis over performance. And if you wait until the end of this session, you will learn why statistics is so crucial, and you cannot only rely on simple data sets and charts. Now we are going to assess the performance of different players. So if it was only one match, for example, match one, we could say player A was better than the rest. B was better than C. But when it goes to 10 matches, it makes it a little difficult. To just only summarize all the scores in one figure, we can use mean as a statistic. So for calculating this mean, we can use average function. And we see that the average for player A is 24.9. So we can say in average, player A scored 24.9 points, right? And let's calculate the same thing for the other players. So for player B, it is 24.9, exactly the same as player A. But for player C, it's a little lower. So we go for player A and B because they had a better performance in average. But there are also differences between behavior of the data. As you can see there, it ranges from 24 to 26. But for player B, it ranges from, let's say, 21 here to 29. Yes, and which one is better? So for this step, we can use variation. And for variation, you can use variation function for samples in Excel. So for player A, this number is 0.54, and for player B is 4.77. But for player C, we don't need it because already we have decided to ignore this player. What is variation? It's the average of square of the distance between each value and the average. Although variation shows how the values, the scores here are spread out, but it doesn't make sense in real world. For example, mean has the same unit as the values. It means 24.9 has the same unit of the values. So here, 24.9 means 24.9 scores like the values. But here, 6.77 doesn't make sense in real world. It doesn't mean points or scores. So to change it to a meaningful unit, we can use standard deviation. To calculate standard deviation in Excel, simply use stdev.s, which is specifically for samples rather than population. So this is a standard deviation for player A, and let's calculate the same thing for player B. And as we expected, standard deviation for player B is much higher than for player A because the numbers are in a larger scale, in a larger range, spread out from 21 to 29. So if you want somebody who has a consistent performance, you have to go for lower standard deviation. And here, player A has the lowest standard deviation. That means higher consistency. Now let's calculate average and standard deviation manually to understand it better. So for mean, first of all, we need the sum of the the sum of the values, you can use sum function. And then you need the number of values just to separate it from the values at this here. And to count the values, you can use the count function. Now it is 10 values. There are 10 values here. So to calculate the mean, we have to divide sum by the count. So you can see this 23.8, the same thing showed by Excel function average. And if I want to calculate variation and standard deviation for player C, I calculated them by functions here. Now let's calculate it manually. The formula for standard deviation is this for sample. So it is summation of square of x minus x bar, which is the average. Here it is 23.8 divided by n minus 1, where n is the number of values. So let's suppose this is x. Then we need to calculate x minus average x, right? So x minus average or mean. The point is we have to fix the reference so we can copy the same formula for all the values. Then we have to raise these values to the power of 2. And for this, we can use this sign to raise to power 2 and copy them for all the values. And we can use some function here to add them up. And if we divide this by n, which is 10 minus 1, we will see this is the same number as variation here. So this is variation. The only difference between variation and standard deviation is that you have to calculate the square root of variation. So you can use sqrt, that is square root function, to calculate the standard deviation. And you can see 4.76 is the same as what is calculated here by the Excel function. And the last step, let's create a chart to understand the meaning of mean and standard deviation better. So I create a line chart here, and then I move it to a new sheet. And here you can see this is the performance of player C, which has a lot of up and down. In contrast, the player A has the least up and down. So it means the minimum standard deviation. You can find it here. See, standard deviation for player A is the minimum, much lower than for player C, which is 4.76. But can you understand which player had the higher average? It's a little difficult to guess from here. So you need to calculate mean based on the numbers, and you cannot guess it only by looking at the chart. Now, why it's really important to calculate these statistics? You can look at this data set, which includes 100 games for 3 players, that makes it much more difficult to understand and analyze, right? Even if I use line charts, you can see it's really difficult to even understand it. You see, a lot of up and downs, and it's really difficult to find which player has highest average and lowest standard deviation. Now let's use conditional formatting and Excel functions to have a very quick analysis on this data set. Okay, so best performance is for the player who has the highest average. So that's why, first of all, we go for calculating average. Let's start with player A. Then I copy it to the next cells for player B and C. And for variation, actually, I don't need variation. I can calculate directly standard deviation. That is for sample. Correcting decimal points. Copying to the next cells. And here, I will use conditional formatting, icon sets, and larger numbers, which are my favorite ones, will be shown and highlighted by green circles. So I will go for only player A and B in this step. This type of conditional formatting will be useful if you have a lot of players rather than only 3. Now I want to use conditional formatting again to see which one has the lowest standard deviation. But as lowest standard deviation is my favorite, I will change the rule from here, manage rules. And here I will edit the rule, and using this button, reverse icon order. And if I apply an OK, I will say that I will only go for those with green mean and green standard deviation. So again, player A is selected based on this data set. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this session and learned how to calculate and utilize statistics, specifically mean and standard deviation, to analyze different sets of data.